Good evening. I want to welcome you to the Sac Collab's first live webinar of the season. This is the first of four such events that we're going to be bringing you between now and late spring to help educate and inform about a lot of the issues that are surrounding COVID-19. My name is Michael P. Coleman, and again, this event is being presented by the Sac Collab. We absolutely couldn't do the work without them. The Sac Collab has a focus on mental health, and the collaborative supports community members and business owners with up-to-date information, guidelines, and resources to stay informed and to stay healthy. Those two things couldn't be more important right now, staying informed and staying healthy. As you know, we're in the middle of a battle. None of us really know we'd still be saying we're in the middle of this thing when we started it a year ago. But even the name COVID-19 reminds us of just how long we've been at it. And with such a long battle, we're facing, fatigue, and we're also facing isolation, the effects of isolation, anxiety, and depression. And those are the issues that we're going to get at tonight. Again, brought to you by Sac Collab. We couldn't do any of the work without our sponsors. We're being made possible. This program is being made possible by the Sierra Health Foundation, by Sacramento County Public Health, by Mental Health California. We're being brought to you by a number of community partners, hearyou.org, folks that are providing critical services to the community and really making all of the work that we do possible. What have we got for you tonight? I can't convey enough how important you already know this work is. If you've been watching the news, you know that we as a country passed a pretty grim milestone just yesterday. 500,000 people this country has lost to COVID-19. To help you wrap your brain around that one, it's as if the entire city of Sacramento, we're broadcasting from Sacramento, the entire city of Sacramento, every resident disappeared in just a year's time. That's a devastating loss of life, but there have been additional losses as well. Loss of income, loss of livelihood, loss of lifestyle. Just the way we go about doing things, we've completely lost, and we've had to manage that as best we can. And as we also have managed trying to stay healthy through social distancing, that's causing isolation, depression, suicides. There's just a lot that we've got to deal with. So we thought we'd bring together a group of thought leaders to help present some information to you. We're really flattered that you would choose to spend some time this evening with us. I apologize for getting us off to a late start this evening, so I'll try to be as respectful of your time as I can be. We're going to jump right into it in just a second with representatives from hearyou.org, a phenomenal keynote speaker, David Woods Bartley, and a singer that you may know from the 12th season, I believe it is, of The Voice. You got to see Missy Robertson. If you're familiar with her from The Voice, you know you need to stick around to the end of this thing. And if you're not familiar with her, trust your host. You need to stick around until the end of this thing. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get rolling. You're not on camera right now. You've probably been in front of a camera for a while today. You've been working or studying, so you're off the hook. Grab a bite to eat, grab your favorite beverage, put your feet up, put your pajamas on if you like, sit back and take advantage of the resources that you can avail yourself to tonight. Don't have to ask you about those mobile devices. Your cameras and microphones are on mute, but please feel free to use the chat function if you got some comments or questions. We'll read through those. We won't be able to get to them live tonight, but we will read every one of those. We'll get to as many of the topics as we can during the program. Also, we'll be posting some links to websites and information throughout the night, so you want to take advantage of that. So without further ado, let's get right at it. We've got a few speakers for you. And first up, I've got a gentleman that is an incredibly dynamic speaker. He's the first of two representatives from hearyou.org. He's the assistant director over there. His name is Jeremiah Aha. And Jeremiah is going to be talking to us about isolation and anxiety during COVID-19. How you doing, Jeremiah? Welcome.
Michael, I'm doing really well. Thanks so much for having us. Appreciate you being a host.
Really well. I'm going to do my best. You know, you guys are doing the heavy lifting. I've just got to keep us on schedule here, Jeremiah. So I'm going to ask you to take it away for a minute. Talk a little bit about why this is so critical. It seems pretty obvious to me, but, COVID-19 for me, anxiety, isolation, depression, I juggle all of those balls at the same time. And so I would think a lot of people are struggling with those, but I don't want to take words out of your mouth. Talk to us about why this is so important.
No, it's a great on-ramp. I really appreciate it. And just on behalf of hearyou.org, Just super grateful to be a part of this project for Sac Collab and just one of the many great partners to provide relief and support and ultimately to provide hope to you, to all of you that are watching or listening. Just really want to have a place of hope tonight for you. You could have been watching a number of very entertaining shows or playing a number of entertaining games tonight, or even taking care of your other obligations and responsibilities. So just thank you for making this a part of your evening and a part of your very busy week. And we hope it's helpful for you. But Michael, I mean, just like you said, you really put things into perspective. We're now in 2021, and it's called COVID-19. But still, there isn't a sense of we're all used to this. And that phrase that's been going around for some time now, the new normal. Can we be real? There's nothing normal about this. This is still very strange, very foreign, very, very difficult. Life was hard before COVID-19. Can we agree on that too? I need to, as a speaker, I only have a few minutes, but we need to start with some common ground, right? I think we can all agree that it was pretty difficult even before the pandemic hit our community. And so for those that maybe haven't had mental health challenges in the past, now maybe you are seeing some of those come to light, seeing some of those maybe manifest in your day-to-day kind of environment, and you wouldn't recognize them as maybe mental health challenges. And that's why I'll take just a few minutes tonight to talk about how anxiety is affecting us and what that looks like just on the road ahead, and how just the negative effects of COVID-19 have really impacted this and the anxiety levels that we all have. There are plenty of stats we could share, plenty of graphs that we could show, this line going up of diagnoses for anxiety, for depression, for self-harm, for suicide. And as a therapist, I really, enjoy, looking at those things. But tonight, just for us to be practical, I want to begin here, because I don't know if everyone here tonight has heard this, and that's this. All of us are not our A+ selves right now. We're just not. We're not at our best. We are not at our best. And hear this, that's okay. That is very, very okay. In fact, that means you're a human being. If you're being affected by this, it is showing that you have limitations and that you're a human being, that you can't do it all. So maybe for the last year and a half or the past few months, you can't remember where you put your keys, or you look for your glasses maybe, and they've been right there around you for the entire time. Or you're having trouble sleeping, or you're having stomach aches, or you're having headaches, or you maybe been a little bit more moody or irritable. All of these are the very small ways that anxiety can show up in our bodies. Because what's happening in the brain, what's happening in the mind, oftentimes has a way of expressing itself physically. Within the therapy world, we call that somatic symptoms, or symptoms within the body. So if you've been thinking, maybe kind of take a look in the rearview mirror over the past few months, and you're like, man, I've been getting sick a lot easier, or I've been a little bit moody lately, or I keep waking up kind of over and over again during the night. These could be some ways that anxiety is showing up in our lives, and it's going to be different for everyone. And that's okay that we're experiencing this, because again, we're going through a global pandemic. The last time this happened was over 100 years ago. So unless anyone is on Zoom tonight and you're over 100 years old, shout out to you if you are, but likely none of us are. So that means what? That means we're all going through this for the very first time. So we're all trying to figure it out. We're all trying our best. So let's begin there, that even at our best, we're not our A+ selves, and that is okay. And I'm going to end with an invitation just to give yourself a break during this time. Things are difficult. Things are more challenging. There's unpredictability. All of our routines are still thrown off. We've been hit by maybe some financial insecurities, things happening with our families. Maybe even someone close to you, someone in your immediate family has been a victim to the coronavirus. And we extend our deepest condolences to you, and we want to be here to provide support and provide hope for you. So what are a couple of things about anxiety in our very short period of time before I turn it over to the great David Woods Bartley? And that's this. During this time of unpredictability and of uncertainty, these are the things that really trigger anxiety in all of us. Structure and predictability are going to be like gold right now. They're going to be prized commodities, structure and predictability. And maybe for those of you that have students in the home, maybe you've slowly learned this, maybe the tough way, but if you haven't, do what you can in your home to set routines, to have rituals, to have a schedule, to do things on a continual basis. And at a time when we're all going through, maybe we hear an answer from some state official or some county official, then we find out that that decision's been overturned. It kind of can take our childcare or our jobs or our financial positions. You know, maybe we're hoping that that stimulus check arrives because it said it was going to be here on Monday, and then it doesn't show up. This brings stress. This brings kind of chronic toxic stress to our systems. So trying to place some structure and predictability in our lives. What could that look like? That could be trying as best you can to go to bed at the same time every night, even on the weekends. Right? That could be trying to wake up at the same time every morning. If you have little ones in the home, trying to make sure they have breakfast before they begin school, if that's available to you. Trying to have regular meal times. It doesn't need to be expensive food from some expensive, place here in Sacramento. Just if it's a regular snack or meal that you can have, because when we are low on fuel, it makes it even harder to deal with things. And finally, in terms of structure and predictability, do what you can to get a good night's sleep. I cannot stress the importance of this. Sleep is the new currency. It really is. You ever noticed how things are so much worse when you're more tired? They really are. Things are so much worse when you're more tired. Our brains are having to work a little bit more. So do what you can to put structure, predictability, routines, and rituals into your home. And we all come from different backgrounds. There's a lot of homes here with us tonight. So whatever that looks like there in your family environment, do what you can to do that. The second thing to tell you is this. Anxiety is always about the future and the fear that comes from picturing that future, okay? So maybe when we send that text message, we're nervous or our stomach's turning in knots. Why? Because the thoughts going through our head are, what if they don't respond? Or what if they say this? Or what if they say that? Or we send something to our supervisor at work, can I get some more hours? Or are you hiring now? Or, can we come pick up, these resources for my family? And we get that pit of nervousness, or we're starting to sweat, or we're sore in our bodies. It's these thoughts, this anxiety of, what if this happens? How am I going to solve that? Okay. So anxiety kind of takes our brains and flings them into the future. So what is the solution for that? Because some of that can be helpful. Some of that can help us stay safe and provide for our families, provide for ourselves. If we're all out going camping and we think we hear a bear in the bushes, for all of us that have healthy kind of amygdala as a part of our brain, we're going to fight or flight and we take off. Me, I'm flying, I'm out of here. Some of you want to fight the bear. But for those of us that are like, nah, it's okay. You just became dinner for Winnie the Pooh, okay? You just became dinner that particular time. So some anxiety and some part of the brain can be helpful, but there's a lot of unhelpful stressors, unhelpful fears about the future that are happening. So how can we mitigate that? How can we buffer that? It's impossible to be grateful and anxious at the same time. It's impossible to be anxious and grateful at the same time. Why? Because gratitude places us in the present. It's what we have in the here and now. So I invite you into this. Every day, maybe make it into a text stream with some family or with some friends. Maybe write it on a place, maybe in your home with your family. Do it as you're sharing kind of bedtimes or meal times or whatever that looks like for you. Make a list of 3 to 5 things, very specific things that you're grateful for. This can be a way to plant our brains, to plant ourselves, to root us, kind of put down roots in the present to prevent us from going into the future so often to the point that it's unhelpful, okay? So structure, predictability, and then also let's begin to keep those gratitude lists. I really encourage you to do this just for 10 days and see what happens in some of your outlook and some of your thinking for you and your lives. Make it like a game with you and your family or your friends. The last thing is this, before I introduce David Woods Bartley, our keynote speaker, and you are in for a treat tonight, is this. Kind of have 2 G's for you. And that is, give yourself a break during this time. Give yourself a break during this time. You're trying your absolute best, okay? You're doing the best that you can, and you're probably doing a lot better than you think you are. So give yourself a break. You have a hard time doing that. Number two is give yourself permission to ask for help. Give yourself permission to ask for help. And there's two resources I have here, and my teammate, Brittany Stone, our clinical director here at hearyou.org, she's going to share more. But through Sac Collab, we're able to offer free online counseling for all Sacramento County residents through hearyou.org. It's online, it's confidential, and it's timely counseling for you. So if you want to sign up, go to hearyou.org/Sac Collab. That's HEARYOU.org/SACCOLLAB to find out more on how to get started. Even with a matter of a day or two, you can get started. Secondly, if you know anyone that maybe is feeling in danger of themselves or others, for immediate support, just have the Suicide Prevention Lifeline on here. That's 800-273-8255. And I can invite one of our hosts to place that in the chat. So give yourself permission to ask for help. It's okay during this time. The only way we're going to get through this is together.
Jeremiah, thanks so much for that information, man. I'm going to take away with me for sure. You can't be anxious and be grateful at the same time. So I'm going to start practicing that tonight. Really appreciate that information that you presented to us. Next up for everybody, David Woods Bartley. Jeremiah kind of got us started on that. I'm going to leave a lot of his bio to you. You can check him out at davidwoodsbartley.com. But I want to say two things. He's going to take us, and I've heard him say this before, he's going to talk about, well, he can talk about, I hope he does. This man goes from mental hellness to inclusive mental wellness. Does that give you an idea of what you're in store for tonight? I got in this man's orbit maybe 7 or 8 years ago, bumped into him literally at a faith-based organization here in Sacramento. Rich was I was thrown when I heard somebody was going to talk about mental health, but I said, let me take it in. And I am here to tell you, I learned that day what the phrase means, the phrase, you could hear a pin drop, because he immediately captured the attention of everybody in that room. So powerful, so transparent, so vulnerable, so moving. And I got up and walked away from that and said, boy, if he could tell his story, I'm going to start telling my own. So David, thanks so much to you. Without further ado, David Woods Bartley. How are you doing, David?
Good, brother. Good, brother. So, I did an interesting calculation today. I have been alive for 21,227 days. That's like more than 20,000 days. And now we've all had days. And in this time of 58 years of living, of all those days, there's one day that will always stand out. And the day is August 31st, 2011. And you may ask why? Why does that day, out of 21,227 days, why does that day stand out? Well, I'll tell you why. August 31st, 2011 was the day that I was going to kill myself. This was the day that I was going to end my life by suicide. This is the day that the monster known as clinical depression, after trying passionately for close to 40 years on that day, convinced me of a whole slate of lies that I took as true with every part of my being. On that day, I believed what the monster had been whispering in my ears for 4 decades, that I was weak and stupid and pitiful, that I was grotesque, that I was useless and worthless, that I had become an embarrassment and a burden to my family and my friends, my then wife, Deanna. But most damning, on that day, the monster convinced me of the awful lie that everybody in my life would be far better off without me if I could just kill myself. And so I was living up in Penryn, in that little beautiful hamlet just past Rockland and Loomis, and Deanna and I were living on a 2.5 acre parcel. I remember waking up on that morning and going outside and kind of taking a last look around, just taking things in, like taking mental snapshots. And then I came back inside and I sat at the computer and I typed out my suicide note. And then, without telling anybody where I was headed, I got in my red Dodge Dakota pickup truck and I made the short drive from our home in Penryn to the Forest Hill Bridge. Now, most of us here know the Forest Hill Bridge, but what you may not realize is the Forest Hill Bridge is the 4th tallest bridge in the country at 730 feet. It stands 500 feet further off the ground than its more famous cousin, just 2 hours to the west. And I made that drive, and I found a place to park that I thought was ideal. And then I brought my vehicle to a rest and I turned off the ignition. And then reflexively, I just put my hands on the 10 and 2 position of the steering wheel, closed my eyes, and then took a deep breath. As I opened them, I reached over, I grabbed the suicide note from the passenger seat. I placed that right in the center of the dash and took the keys out of the ignition, placed those in the center of the note, exited, turned back around just to make sure that the door was unlocked. Crossed the road, went down to the closest point of the bridge. Now the bridge is a half-mile long. View is spectacular. On that day, all I saw was the light post that stands 1,000 feet right at the midpoint of the bridge deck, at the highest point, 730 feet above the North Fork of the American River. And I was focused, I was laser focused. I saw nothing else but the light post. And in a short period of time, I made my way to that midpoint, turned to my left, not looking up, suicide barrier hit me right about here. Bent over, focused on the river. Closed my eyes again, practicing, rehearsing the move up and over the barrier. It's going to take me 7.5 seconds to fall. I was preparing myself. I became so fixated that to this day, 9 years later, I don't know how long I was in that position. I don't know. But thankfully, it was long enough for a passing driver to look upon me, bent over, realizing something's not right with this picture, calling 911, and then a heroic sheriff's deputy from Placer County approached me from the left-hand side and did two simple things. The first was he established contact, which is logistical. But then he created connection, which is life-saving, because connection creates hope. And hope indeed saves lives. I was taken off the bridge to the emergency department and to the PUF. The PUF is the psychiatric health facility. It's the psych ward at Kirby Hills. And I would be there for the next 15 life-changing, life-altering days. But when people found out I was there and why, they were shocked. They couldn't believe it, because instead of seeing me as clinically depressed or suicidal, people saw me as one half, the co-director of a large, nationally recognized senior special needs and end-of-life animal sanctuary called A Chance for Bliss. And if you liked animals, you would have loved the sanctuary. It was home to as many as 100 animals at any one time. 25 horses, 23 dogs, 9 pot-bellied pigs, goats and sheep and ducks and geese and turtles and fish, like this whole thing. Noah, if he came back today, he'd be jealous. He'd be like, whoa, man, what's up with this? And we did no adoptions because we wanted the unadoptables. And in a short period of time, we became known as a forever home for those unadoptable animals. I didn't fit the image of somebody who was mentally ill. I didn't fit the image of somebody who was depressed. I didn't fit the image of somebody who was clinically depressed, somebody who is at risk. But the most important thing that I'm going to share with you tonight is this, that sometimes what hurts the most can't be seen. Sometimes great despair and soul-crushing, soul-killing agony lies just behind a forced smile, a distracting joke, or in this case, a seemingly perfect and ideal life. And because of that, not even my former beloved, Deanna, they didn't know the place of precarious hopelessness that I was on that particular day. But there I was on a dark spot on a tall, tall bridge, one movement away from killing myself. But my life was saved. And on a day I thought would be my very last day alive, it was instead the first day of a brand new life and the first steps in what my dear, dear brother Michael said, away from mental hellness and into our birthright. Mental health is not some privilege of the rich and the famous. Every sentient being that comes into this life experience has the right to be mentally healthy, to be mentally well. And it's such an honor. It's so wonderful to go on the heels of my beautiful brother, Jeremiah. And I want to share with you some things tonight. First, I want to share with you what it feels like, because I still have my days. There are still days the monster has me around the neck and wants to shake me to death. And I want to tell you what I've learned over this 9 years and what it takes to be well, but most importantly, what can we do? What can we do to serve each other, to serve our brothers and sisters in need, to serve our brothers and sisters, not just by familial relationship, but around us? So first thing, what does it feel like? Dr. Beverly Shank probably said it best, in which she said that depression must surely be the first cousin to hell on earth. Absolutely. Imagine if you were a bait dog in a dogfighting ring. Imagine if living was like breathing through tar. Imagine waking up and wishing you had died in your sleep. Imagine a time that you looked in the mirror and you thought, man, I don't have it going on today. Imagine a time that you made a mistake that you thought was unforgivable. Imagine a time that you felt despair. Imagine a time that you felt alone. Imagine a time that you felt hopeless, like there was no solution, there was no reason to go on. Imagine a time that you felt invisible. Now, mix all that up in this awful cauldron and heat it up into an intolerable temperature, and then drink it down. And that just gives you an initial glimpse, just a little teeny bitty glimpse of what it's like to live with this horror. And what happens is a soul gets beat upon, not just your mind, but also your body and your spirit. And you get beat upon day after day, after day after day. And ultimately, like a balloon where the air goes out of the balloon, the life goes out of your soul. And you get into the place of hopelessness. Really, the true killer of people who suffer from mental illness is not the malady itself, it's hopelessness. And I was in that space when I went into the psychiatric hospital, but unbelievably, my life changed there in ways that I would have never expected. The first thing is I learned what was this condition, what caused it. And the second day I sat down with this amazing psychiatrist that hopefully you've had the experience of being in somebody's presence that just has some good vibes. And he didn't just start out with clinical questions. We began to talk like two guys sitting in a bar. And then he went in and I learned that my condition came as a result of the terrible confluence of the inherited genetics from my grandfather who ended his life by suicide, the inherited genetics of my father who suffered horrifically from clinical depression. He was one of the early patients of ECT. It just, life was a chore. And while he died early on at only 41 years old when I was very young, he died from cancer, but depression had ravished him and made him immutable. And I learned that so that was the one influence. But the doctor explained to me that the genetics, the dry kindling of genetics has to be ignited. And oftentimes, unfortunately, with mental illness, it's trauma. And he created the space for me to talk about trauma. The first was that I had lost my father when I was just 7. And he said, David, I'm so sorry. That's horrific for a boy to lose his father. I'll never forget. Then he said, has there been anything else? And there was. There was a secret I had held inside for close to 48 years, but he created this space. And I shared with him that, doctor, when I was 11, I was brutally sodomized and violated and raped by a Boy Scout leader. And this man leaned forward in that place and took me by my hands and looked me in the eyes and said, David, it's not your fault. I couldn't hear it. The monster had convinced me it was my fault. And this extraordinary man picked up on these nonverbal clues, held my hand just a little bit more lovingly and compassionately and said, dear one, it's not your fault. I heard it the second time, and every time I tell those stories, I hear it it inflates my soul. And then over the course of those 15 days, I learned what it takes to be well. And I remember him telling me at this point, we had a little bit of a kind of a fun relationship. He said, hey, dude. And I said, hey, dude. And he said, here's the thing, man, you're not just going to wake up one day and be well. It ain't going to happen. You are going to have to work at this. You are going to have to put your self-care high on a pedestal, my brother. You are going to have to attend to body, mind, and spirit. And he would be happy to know that, yes, indeed, that's what I do. It's about sleep and diet and exercise. It's about psychiatry and psychology and counseling and peer support and medication. It's about my own spiritual practice. And this is my purpose. This is what I get to do. The sanctuary no longer exists. But I endeavor to use stories that I'll share at the end, one of which, to wrap mental health in an animal tale. But of everything I do, dear ones here, of everything I do, the single most important thing is connection. Imagine self-care like a vehicle. You need fuel, you need power. We hear that the 3 most important words in real estate are location, location, location. Okay. 3 most important words in mental health are connection, connection, connection. That's it. Jeremiah talked about the currency. Well, Dr. Travis, a great friend of mine, says that the currency of wellness is connection. It's the medium of exchange. It's the check that you write to be well. Connection transforms. Connection creates hope. Hope saves lives. And Dee and I saw this at the sanctuary time and time again. Hundreds of miraculous transformations from hopelessness to hopefulness. They went from skinny and scarred and beaten and bruised to solid and strong and bold and beautiful. And what was interesting is we did kind of a few of those 23andMe DNA things. And there were some animals that their lineage went all the way back to the dinosaurs because they became bratosauruses. They were just brats. But that was good because when you're depressed, you have your void of personality. There's nothing that you can do, but when you feel good, especially we boys, we can be a little jerky, we can be a little stupid, but you're alive. And so then the question becomes, all right, man, Baldy, how do you create connection? Well, I'm so glad you asked. And there's a French word for pathway. It's route, R-U-E. And I'm going to talk about quickly recognition, understanding, and expression. Sometimes a soul is in despair, invisible to us, and the thing that they need most in life is to be recognized. And in recognition, as a gateway to connection, it lets somebody know that they're valid, that they're worthy, that they're worthy of consideration. And you can do this a lot of ways, but I think calling somebody out by name is the most beautiful. Now we'll say, well, I'm no good with names. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to accept that as an excuse. You need to realize the genius of the great Dale Carnegie and what he said, that to a person, the sound of that person's name is the sweetest sound in any language. And let me just give you a little suggestion. You meet somebody, you're trying to remember their name. After they tell you, ask them this question. What's the story behind your name? 99% of us have a story, and you give this soul, this person that you've met, an opportunity to tell their story. Sometimes they don't even know it. Met a young woman at a talk that I gave. She was sitting in the front row. I came to thank her for sitting in the front row, and I said, what's your name? And she said, my name is Hope. And I said, you have no idea how much I love that name. What's the story behind your name? She said, I don't know. I said, you don't know why your parents named you Hope? She said, I don't know. Wow. A little bit later, same event, standing in a big room waiting to hear the great Brian Stevenson. Somebody taps me on the shoulder. I spin around. There's Hope. She thrust her phone in my face, and it was a text that she sent to her mom and dad. Said, Mom and Dad, why did you name me Hope? And her parents wrote back and said, because we knew that's what you would bring to the world. What's the story behind your name? And now let's look at understanding, and that this thing around mental illness is tough. It's huge. It creates fear, but I believe that the most direct path we can take to overcoming our fears related to mental illness is to leverage the power of curiosity to create understanding. Story is much greater than impression. The great sage, Mr. Rogers, says, quite frankly, there's no one you can't learn to love once you know their story. The opposite of fear isn't calm. The opposite of fear is understanding. The more we understand, the less we fear. And so we have to ask tough questions, counterintuitive questions. First question out of the first responder's mouth after he had established the safety, he looked at me and he said, David, what does it feel like to be depressed? You would think that's the question that tosses a soul over the edge, but it's actually the question that keeps us safe. It gives us a chance to speak. And then he went on another series of questions, interesting, leveraging what and how, not why and when. And then he listened and brought to the mind the great Rachel Naomi Remen, who says, our listening creates a sanctuary for the homeless parts and other people. And ultimately, this amazing man had me look up and take the view and then turn to my left and retrace my steps. And as we walked off that bridge, he looked at me and he said, thank you for telling me how you feel. Recognition, understanding, and then expression. And quite simply put, people, dear ones, we have to let each other know how we feel. We must tell them, I love you in the morning, in the noon, in the night. We got to let them know, send them a text, make it timely, make it specific, make it authentic. I'm going to go on the dovetails, the coattails of my great friend Jeremiah. I want you every day for the next 30 days to write a handwritten note. I've been on the receiving end of these. None will be greater than this. And it was from a young woman named Natalie, who's like a daughter to me. And she tells me she loves me. She reminds me that my diagnosis is not my identity. She reminds me that we get to do this together. It's a team thing, and she is ready to kick some depression ass. But at the end, she says 7 words that will remain tattooed to my soul in no uncertainty. And with great emphasis, she says, depression can't have you because you're ours. We are in the midst of a huge problem. And Dr. Drew Ramsey, a psychiatrist from New York, puts it perfectly like this: the problem and the solution. These are his words, not mine. Someone you see today is thinking about killing themselves. Your smile, your question, your love could save them. Trust me, they told me it did. And let me end with one story, an animal story, to kind of put the whole thing together. So one day, Dee and I get a call at the sanctuary from a dear, dear friend of ours, Dr. Margaret Hunt, one of those heroic veterinarian to work in a difficult situation, deciding which animals live and die. And by the time Dr. Hunt called us, we were known as lovers of all things old and especially all things Boston Terrier. Those 20-pound, more slender version of a bulldog dressed in a black and white tuxedo and made up of two things and two things only, equal part enthusiasm and gas. Dr. Hunt calls and says, I have this old Boston Terrier. She has a skin condition. She can't stand up. There is no way she's going to be rescued, but there's something about this pup. Can you please take her? And Dee and I said, yes, of course. And we go down, and sure enough, this pup, I call all dogs pups, was exactly what Dr. Hunt said. And before we could ask, she says, I named her Ruth. And I thought, God, what a beautiful name. And before we could ask why, she said, because I wanted her to have respect. I wanted her to have understanding. And I wanted her to have truth, and I wanted her to have honor. And I thought, that's just so magnificent. So we brought her home and we introduced her to the other dogs. Now, dogs leverage curiosity to create understanding. They just do it with their nose. And so all the dogs lived in the house. Now, don't go to a bad place. It was incredibly clean. So Ruthie was there, splayed out because she couldn't stand it. And it was fascinating to me to watch how one dog by another dog would just go sit in her proximity. And then we would feed Ruthie, and one of the other dogs would come eat with her. They knew that connection creates hope. Hope saves lives. And one day I'm working in the inside, and all of a sudden out of my eyes, out of a corner, I'm like, oh my God, Ruth is walking. Connection, filling up the soul to be able to move you forward. And she just started to get, in Deanna's words, a little pep in her hey. And now when one of the dogs came close, she went, just having fun. Well, we had these dog doors, and they went into the backyard and back and forth. And there was this one day I'm out there, I'm kind of counting the dogs. And I'm thinking, oh my God, where's Ruth? And I look, and my beautiful pup is digging. She's digging. She's remembering what a dog does. And then all of a sudden her head pops up, and she has this smelly, gross, wonderful bone that one of the other dogs had buried. And she turns around, and her head is up like she is the proudest pony in the world. And she has her bone, and she's going into her house. Her self-respect had been restored. She felt like she was understood. She remembered the truth of who she was, and she was taking up her rightful place amongst her family. We are all given a name at birth, and even if we share that name with somebody else, that's our unique moniker. That's how we know. But I believe at the core of who we are all Ruth. That's our name. We are all called by that name. That's our soul name. And so in this day and age, as my dear brother, I'm going to hand it over to you as he lets us know how important it is, maybe the most essential thing that we can do for one another is to help each other remember our name. God bless. Thank you.
You asked a question. You said you hope that we would one day be in the presence of somebody that's got good vibes. And man, we were just in the presence of somebody that's got good vibes. So thank you very much for that, David. Next up, and I'm going to try to keep us on schedule here, running just a few minutes behind, but we'll try to get back on track for you. I've got to introduce to you our next speaker. I'd love to do that. Brittany Stone is also with HearYou.org. She's clinical director over there, and she's going to walk us through how to manage depression. How are you doing tonight, Brittany?
I'm doing well, Michael. Thank you. Good to see you again. And
Good.
So good to be part of this campaign, and thankful for the Sac County Collab pushing mental health awareness to the forefront.
Really appreciate having you. I'm going to turn it over to you in a second. I'd just like you to touch on, hopefully, I was thinking about some of what David had to say and Jeremiah before. We've been in this for quite a long time, and certainly we can see a light at the end of the tunnel with therapeutics and the vaccine being rolled out. But I think you might agree with me. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel's longer than we thought it was going to be when we entered into this last year. So if you could touch on, with the length of that journey comes fatigue and might come depression. I like what David had to say. Give yourself permission to not feel okay. I think that was Jeremiah. Touch on that a little bit. We all could use strategies. If we've, some of us have dealt with depression before. For some of us, it's brand new with COVID-19. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Get right at it, if you would, for us.
Michael, you're right, because depression and anxiety now are looking different than they did before COVID. And for some of us who struggled with that even 6 months ago during this pandemic, those symptoms or signs of depression and anxiety are shifting. So what used to look like fatigue or low mood now for some is looking like irritability and anxiety. So, you're spot on that it has changed and it is challenging. So what I'd like to do is to offer some strategies that people can use today. And sadly, with the way the pandemic has been, having that isolating piece has been a challenge for that connection that David spoke so much about. And so I want to empower everybody to leave today feeling like they have strategies to use for themselves, and most importantly, have strategies to support themselves or someone else in the hard conversations and the hard questions, to just check in and see if people are okay. Because not everyone who needs counseling is getting counseling. And a lot of people would benefit just from someone saying, hey, you matter. And if you're not okay, then we can get you support, and that's okay. So dealing with depression during COVID-19 is what we're going to talk about for the next few moments. And I've been a counselor for 14 years now, so it's been my honor to be able to sit with people during the hardest times of their lives and guide them through depression, anxiety, loss, transition. So to me, there's so much value that I've seen, not just for myself as a therapist and loving my work, but for the person who needs that support, to just feel like someone is here and someone is making me feel seen and known and has a plan. Now, right now, not everyone is getting access to support because of this wonderful program we have through Sac Collab. There are resources I'll tell you about in a moment, but just as humans, we can offer so much support to each other, and you don't have to be a therapist to do it. You can do that just through asking a few questions and having a good strategy for that conversation. So I'd like to just empower everyone who's joining us at home to know that there's a good model that you can use. We have one I'll show you today, and that can guide your conversations with others if you're worried about someone close to you. And it can guide conversations with your own self if you think that you might be at that place of needing some support. And I'll walk you through briefly how this goes. Before we start, I'd like to just encourage everyone at home who's joining us to take a deep breath. So I know we've talked about heavy things today. They're very real, very valid. So just take a deep breath to join me in a moment of self-care. And this model is to guide your conversations, like I said, with yourself or with someone else who may be struggling. So the first step is to observe. If you're talking about someone else and having a conversation with them, observe where they're at. Are they crying? Do they look exhausted? Do they look like self-care has been taking a toll? Does it look like they've been captured in news, scrolling, or maybe isolating in their bedroom? And if you're looking at your own self, how are you doing? Take a second to think, if you were to observe yourself in your normal actions, has it been hard to get out of bed? Has it been hard to get off the couch? Has it been hard to make connection? So start with observation. Next is listening. So we are in a fix-it-quick culture, right? So we always want to offer quick solutions. I read this, I saw this. But I would encourage you, if you're talking to someone who may be struggling right now with depression or anxiety, take a moment to just listen. Hear them out, let them be heard. And for your own self, I would encourage you to take this one step further. When you're evaluating and listening to yourself, think about, what have you been saying? What have you been posting? What have you been typing lately? What have you been texting? Because that might be a good indicator to how you're doing and where your mental health is at. Next, inquire. That just means ask. We get afraid sometimes of having the hard conversations with people, but we are all capable of intervening for someone who needs help today. So inquire of that person. Have you been thinking about suicide? Have you been this low for a long time? Would you be open to talking more? Can I text you to check in tomorrow? And then for yourself, if you're having this conversation as your own support, that inquiry would look like, how am I really doing? Is this me healthy? It's good questions to ask. And then validate. The V in our Oliver model is to validate. So that just means supporting someone's truth. You may not totally understand. You may think, that someone else's problem is not as big as your problem, or may not understand what they're going through, but you can validate that that's their truth and stand with them in that. Same for yourself. We are allowed, like Jeremiah said, we are not our A+ selves. And Michael, like you said, so many people are struggling now. David, you walked us through such a strong, amazing story there. Validating what it's like for that person in the moment is powerful and can be helpful just in and of itself. Encourage, offering encouragement. This is going to get better. It doesn't have to be like this. Simple steps can make this better right away. And finally, to reach out and refer. If someone that you know or that you may have this conversation with is struggling right now, they may need you to take the next step to call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, to text home to 741-741 to get some suicide support, or to go with them to the hospital, or to get counseling. And what can you do today? A few quick interventions. The routine: set an alarm, get ready for the day. Move your body. Your mind and your body are connected. Reach out for support. Sometimes a supportive conversation is not enough, and people need counseling. They need help. They need to see a doctor or a counselor. Sometimes just connecting with a loved one can meet that need. Redirect your thinking. Focus on what gives you purpose. You're here for a reason and you matter. If you're in Sacramento County, our services are covered under Sac Collab, so you can reach out there. I think that information has been in the chat. If you're outside of Sacramento County, we are still a nonprofit that offers low-cost counseling that's timely, affordable, and confidential. So check out our website. And we have a diverse staff who are wonderful, very knowledgeable. We have clinicians who speak 8 languages, I believe, on staff. So we would love to offer this support to you and walk you through if you're having a difficult time right now. So please feel free to reach out here, and we would love to support you in your journey.
Hey, Brittany, can't thank you enough for that information. Really appreciate the tools and the resources and the help and the attention and the care that you showed tonight. I want to remind everybody about that incredible offer for anyone that's living in Sacramento County. Free mental health services are available to you if you're a county resident. So go check that website out and take advantage of those resources. Just about ready to wrap up the evening, but before we go, we got an incredible performer for you. You may know her from season 12 of The Voice on NBC. If you caught her there, you know what you're in for. Missy Robertson is up next, and she's got a couple of selections for us. She's a vocalist, and she's absolutely going to blow you away. So let me just ask her to take it away, Missy Robertson.
Thanks for having me, you guys. I'm going to sing a couple songs, so sit back and enjoy. She just wants to be beautiful, she goes. I know that she knows. No limit, she craves. Attention, she praises. And limit, she prays. Sculpted by the sculptor. Oh, she don't see the light that shines deeper than the eyes can find it. Maybe we are made of blind souls. She tries to cover up a path and cut her walls away. 'Cause cover girls don't cry. I tear their faces made. There's a hope that's waiting for you in the dark. You should know you're beautiful just the way can't change its heart. No skies, you're beautiful. With stars and we're beautiful. She has dreams to be an envy, so she's starving, you know. Cover girls eat nothing, she says. Beauty is pain and there's beauty in everything. What's a little bit of hunger? I can go a little while longer. She fades away, she don't see you're perfect. She don't understand she's worth it. That beauty goes deeper than the surface. Oh, to all the girls that's hurting, let me be your mirror. Help you see a little bit clearer. The light that shines within. There's a hope that's waiting for you in the dark. You should know you're beautiful just the way you are. You don't have to change a thing. The world can't change its heart. No skies, you're beautiful. With stars and we're beautiful. Oh, you don't have to change a thing. The world can't change its heart. No skies, you're beautiful. The skies and we're beautiful. No better you than you are. Oh, we're beautiful. Oh, we're beautiful. 'Cause there's a heart that's waiting for you in the dark. You should know you're beautiful just the way you are. You don't have to change a thing. The world can change its heart. No skies, you're beautiful. The skies and we're beautiful. You don't have to change a thing. The world can change its heart. No stars, you're beautiful. Stars and we're beautiful. Broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round. You can't seem to find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we're gonna rock it out and move mountains. We're gonna walk it out. Move mountains. And I'll rise up, rise like the day. I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid. I'll rise up to 1,000 times again. I'll rise up, high like the waves. I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I'll rise up to 1,000 times again. Thank you guys so much for having me tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wow, wow, Missy, thank you so much. That was amazing, amazing. Don't do that to me at the end of a program again. I had to dry my eyes to get ready to say thank you to you. Thank you so much. That was so powerful.
Thank you.
Take care. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for spending some time with us this evening. We're unfortunately out of time. I hope you got something out of tonight. I know you could have been in a lot of other places, so we really appreciate the time and attention that you've given us tonight. I want to say thank you very briefly to all of our speakers and performers, to Jeremiah Aha, to David Woods Bartley, to Brittany Stone, and to Missy Robertson, who closed that out in such a beautiful, beautiful way. I also want to thank our production team really quickly, if you'll allow me to do that. Behind the scenes, making all of this look good, with the exception of an error or two on the part of your host. We had Dwight Brown, he was producer tonight. Lee Jordan was the second producer on tonight. Kim Mims and Christine Smith helped fill in that production team, that technical team, and they did a fabulous job keeping us going tonight. I want to thank all of our sponsors, Sierra Health Foundation, without whom we couldn't do any of this work. Sacramento County Public Health is a part of this, Mental Health California, to help Sac Collab bring this program to you. Again, tonight has been the first of a series of live webinars we'll be bringing you this winter and spring. Mark your calendar for March 23rd. That's the second in the series. You'll get details of that on your device, or come to the website and we can give you all the information on that. So until next time, my name again, Michael P. Coleman. It's been an honor and a privilege to be a part of tonight. I want to invite you to do me two quick favors as we get ready to say goodbye. You take good care of yourself, and then while you're at it, take good care of somebody else. Again, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.